4 true Halloween night encounters from the backroads of Texas open fields. Dead wind and something older than the fences. Heed the rules each place keeps, or it will keep you. Welcome to the Black Hour Stories. Tonight holds 4 real accounts from rural Texas, all happening on Halloween night, when farm sky turns black as a well and the wind tastes like pennies. These aren't pranks or costumes. These are the things the fences are meant to keep out and can't. Settle in and listen for the rules. They show up before the claws. Our first story title is The Windmill That Drank the Wind. He had always known that windmill. It stood alone on a fenced patch of hardpan near a dry creek, its blades frozen more years than anyone cared to count. On Halloween night, he drove the Kalish Road with dust rising in the headlights like pale smoke. Far out past the last porch light, he parked by the rusted gate, clicked off the engine, and felt the warm silence of a Texas night press against the cab. He'd promised himself he wouldn't be stupid. 29, not a kid, just passing back through town before moving on. He wanted one last look at the place that made him feel small, that old windmill with its tail thin like a broken cross. He'd heard the old story. When the wind dies there, the tower climbs by itself. He'd always laughed at the idea until he set his hand on the gate that night and felt it vibrate like a guitar string with no sound at all. He stepped over the low spot where the wire sagged. Dry grass rasped his jeans. Mesquite thorns scratched at his sleeves. Coyotes yipped far off, then went quiet. He looked up at the moon. It sat low and woolly, like a lantern wrapped in dust. The blades didn't move. The tail didn't move. The air didn't move. The silence had weight. He took 3 more steps and smelled something wet, thin as a thread in the dry night stock tank water, old and iron-rich. There wasn't any tank anymore. The drought had taken it years back. He knew that. Still, the smell ran through his nose like a memory. He rubbed his arms and told himself the air was cooling. He told himself this was simple. Something clicked high in the tower. He stopped and squinted. A high bolt turned a fraction, like fingers testing it. He could see where the ladder rungs climbed the legs in a straight line into the dark. The old men at the feed store used to say a rancher's boy got his boot caught up there and hung all night, drowned by the wind that poured down the shaft when the blades spun too fast. They said the tower learned the shape of him. They said on windless nights it climbed on its own to look for one more body. He didn't believe it. He kept walking, hand out to touch the leg, to prove to himself the metal was dead. When his fingers met the steel, the tower felt skin warm. He jerked his hand back and saw the print he left in dust on the leg, a soft oval. A second oval appeared above it, smaller, as if a child's palm pressed right after his. He watched the powder shift by itself and knew it had nothing to do with wind. The ladder let out a slow, dry sigh. It sounded like a man who had held his breath too long. He took a step back and his heel hit a bone-white root. His mouth went dry. The smell of water grew strong, thick and brown, like the stock tank had come up out of the ground to meet him. He told himself to walk. He told himself to climb the fence and drive away and laugh about it tomorrow. Then the first rung creaked. He stared up at the darkness between the blades. Something was moving. The bolts were turning, not with breeze, but with choice. He remembered the rule the old men said, the one they said like a joke. If you stand at the windmill on a windless night and it starts to climb, you do not look up. He looked up anyway. For a heartbeat, he saw the outline of a body against the sky, a figure hanging where the ladder met the platform skin thin, shirt stuck to ribs like wet paper. Then there wasn't anything there, only black. The tower shook once, like a dog throwing off water. A drop hit his face. It wasn't rain. It tasted like rust. He stumbled backward and grabbed the fence. The wire bit his palm hard and honest. He hauled himself over and ran to the truck, heart thudding, feeling the heat of that shot-down engine like a hand. The keys shook in the ignition. The starter ground. The truck coughed. The tower creaked again, and the smell of tank water poured across the road. He turned the key so hard his knuckles ached. The engine caught. In the rear-view mirror he saw the blades turning. No wind blew. The grass was still. The blades turned smooth as a waltz, and for a breath or three, the shadows took the shape of thin legs climbing, hand over hand, up into the night. He drove fast, dust boiling behind him. He told himself he was out of it. He told himself the mirror lied. He told himself a lot of things until the road straightened and the smell left. When he got to the edge of town, he pulled over under a busted street lamp and breathed through the steering wheel. His shirt clung cold to his back. He felt a sting on his forearm. 4 parallel scratches ran from wrist to elbow, not deep, just enough to smart. He wiped at the lines and came away with a faint dust like ground metal glittering in the lamp. He looked at the clock on the dash. It was 3:10 a.m. He watched the second hand and saw it skip forward, then lag, then skip again, like something catching its breath. He left the town before sunrise like he'd planned. He never told anyone what he saw. Years later, when he drove his own kid through that county, he stayed on the highway and watched the land out of the corner of his eye. The windmills out there were new and white, tall as stories. A few old ones still stood with their tails crooked against the sky. When the wind died, he didn't look. The rule had arrived the hard way. Our second story of the night is the third white cross. She had been driving the farm-to-market road since she got her license. Halloween was only a date on the calendar, and she was one of those who liked the quiet. From the 2-lane you could see miles of cotton stubble and the faint orange glow of a distant gas flare. The radio barely came in, voices thin as thread. 3 white crosses stood on the right shoulder where a curve tightened like a fist. She knew the story the way everyone did. A wreck years back, folks put up 1 cross for each life. They said another woman died there on a later Halloween, a stranger who stepped into the road. No one ever claimed her. The trooper who worked the second accident quit the next spring and moved to San Angelo. People said if you didn't slow for the 3rd cross at midnight, the stranger got in your car without opening a door. They said you only saw her in the mirror, and the reflection ran a few seconds behind your movements, like old video dragging. She used to laugh and tap her brakes, just to be safe. She told herself she was doing it for the story more than the spirit. That Halloween night, she left a backyard fire with clothes smelling like smoke and mesquite. She was sober and steady. The clock on her dash rolled to 12:01 as she passed the feed store. A stray dog trotted across a parking lot. The moon hid behind thin cloud like grease on glass. She reached the curve and saw the crosses, white paint scabbed by sun. Someone had laid plastic flowers. A small orange pumpkin sat crooked on the middle one. She told herself to tap the brakes. Her foot hovered. She didn't. She held steady out of a mean streak she barely knew she had and felt the curve pull her through like a slow tide. The cabin air turned cold. The radio hissed and lost its voice. She kept both hands on the wheel and looked forward. Her skin crawled like ants under a sleeve. She forced herself not to glance at the mirror. She passed the cattle guard where the road went straight again. She breathed out and the windshield fogged a little where it never had before. She told herself she was fine. She told herself nothing had happened. Then she saw the faint smear of moisture on the passenger window, like someone breathed against it from inside. The fog traced a shape, a short arc, then two longer lines below, as if the place where a mask would rest had touched and lifted away. She kept driving. She told herself not to touch the radio. The dashboard clock ticked to 12:04, then stumbled back to 12:02, then jumped forward again. Her heart kept good time even if the clock didn't. She took the next slow bend. In the mirror, the back seat showed as a deeper dark. The mirror image lagged a half count behind her own steering. She watched the white line drift and return. Her mirror showed it returning after she already felt it under her tires. A smell filled the car, old burlap and damp weeds, the kind of smell that rides home in a truck bed after a flooded ditch. Something tugged at the seatbelt hard enough to make the shoulder strap bite. She breathed slow and said nothing. If she said anything, she knew the mirror would show her mouth moving and then catch up, and she did not want to see the lag around her own lips. She kept her eyes on the road and drove past the gravel drive that cut toward a windbreak of cedar. A floodlight popped on far back there and went off again. Coyotes yodeled once and shut up. Something soft brushed the back of her neck, the touch of a skirt or long hair pulled by a draft. She swallowed and tasted iron like old water. She passed an old church where the bell tower didn't have a bell. The empty square breathed darkness into the sky. At the stop sign, she let the car roll slow and looked down at her hands. They shook. She told herself to turn right for town. Her right blinker clicked. In the mirror, the blinking was 2 clicks behind. She couldn't help it. She looked straight into the glass. The back seat was full of a woman-shaped dark with a sack over its face. The sack was wet at the mouth. The fabric was tight across places where a face should be. When the light from the dash rolled across the weave, it showed the faint marks of a jaw turned wrong, like it had learned to sit in a shape that didn't belong to the living. Her own reflection smiled a fraction after her mouth went tight, as if the mirror were pulling strings. The woman in back didn't move. The belt tugged again. A drop of water hit the side of her neck, cool and certain. She stomped the gas and took the turn too fast. The tires spit gravel. She ran a quarter mile and pulled into a wide spot where trucks turned their trailers. She threw the car into park and stared forward. Her hands dug into the wheel until her fingers hurt. The smell of wet burlap grew thick, then lighter, then thin, as if a door cracked and then closed. She did not look back again. She rolled her window down to let the cold air in. The fog at the passenger glass faded. The dashboard clock jumped forward to 12:10 and then held. Her right shoulder stopped hurting. The mirror movements lined up with her hands again. She sat there breathing until the world felt like itself. At home, she found mud in the trunk. Not much, just 3 fingertips pressed into the fabric near the latch. Cotton fluff clung to the mud like drowned feathers. She left the car unlocked that night. She never passed the 3rd cross at speed again, not even in daylight. She tapped her brakes and said a name she did not know out loud in case hearing it helped the stranger rest. She didn't try to fix the rule. She only followed it.
Here is our next story named Silo Voices at 3:10. They were not bad kids. They were only bored and loud on Halloween, the kind who drove back roads with a thermos of hot coffee and a bag of mini candy bars from their aunt's bowl. They parked by the old grain elevator outside of town, all corrugated metal and a rusted conveyor slanting into a dark slit near the top. The elevator had stood empty since the co-op closed. Wheat dust still lived in the seams. The night air carried a dry sweetness that didn't belong to any living field. They'd heard what older cousins said. On Halloween at 3:10 a.m., the silo sang. Not songs, not hymns, something like a low prayer that used no words anyone knows now. If you answered with your own name, the dust would learn the weight of it, and the steps would add one more rise to their count and never give it back. If you kept your mouth shut, you could leave with the number you came with. They talked big and walked toward the door with phones for light. The sky looked tall enough to drown in. The metal door had a chunk busted out near the latch, a gap big enough for a shoulder. They squeezed through and tasted old flour on their tongues. The inside felt colder than the air outside, a sealed cool that came from depth. They played their lights across the curved walls. You could see tiny trails where moths had died in the dust. The stairs rose along the inside in crooked flights, iron with a grit underfoot that felt like sand and rust. They started up, counting each step like a dare. The number was supposed to be 97 to the catwalk, then another 19 to the high platform that watched the conveyors. They wanted to make fun of the number. They wanted to prove how silly it was. They counted 21, 44, 60, 76. Their breath steamed, then didn't. It was hard to tell. Their lights shook a little on the walls. One of them trailed a fingertip along the dust and left a line like a pencil mark. The mark filled in behind her finger as if she had never touched it. Hook 1. They reached 97 and found only a blank panel of corrugated metal, no catwalk. The stairs went on. They looked at each other and laughed a small laugh that had no fun in it. They kept climbing. The metal popped and ticked as it cooled. The light swam in their hands. They hit 112 and found the catwalk then, late by 15, like the elevator had moved itself while they were watching it. Hook 2. They crossed the catwalk and it hummed under their weight, not like a machine but like a throat holding a note in the back where sound waits its turn. One of them said she heard whispering. Another said it was only wind trapped in the ribs of the place. The third said he smelled hot grain, impossible in the cold. He put his palm on the rail. It felt like skin over a knot of muscle, alive and slow. They looked at their phones. 3:07 a.m. The second hand crept. They all went quiet, not because they planned to, but because the room told them to. The air pressed in with a kindness that wasn't kind at all. A soft voice rose from below, low and steady, like the sound mothers make to soothe a crying baby. Simple and circular, with a rhythm that matched a heartbeat. It came from the empty bins, as if grain still lived there, and remembered the hands that shoveled it in and the feet that slipped in it. The voice didn't have words, but it did have a pattern. It rose and fell 3 times and then held, a long sleep sound in a throat the size of a room. Their chests tightened when it held. When it fell, their chests loosened. They realized together it was making room for their breath. Hook 3. 3:10 a.m. landed with a small click on all 3 of their screens. The sound became thicker, like the voice had turned its head and faced them. The youngest felt something ask for her name without sound. She opened her mouth because manners are hard to unlearn. The oldest touched her sleeve and shook his head. She closed her mouth and nodded. She could feel her own name sitting on her tongue like a small, warm coin. A hush fell hard. Their lights dimmed a little, not the batteries, not the bulbs. The light itself seemed tired. The dust hung still. Then the seams along the corrugated wall shed a thin line of pale chaff and closed again. It looked like a mouth testing its teeth. The stairs shifted under them by half an inch in a way that said the place could shrug and spill them if it wanted. They backed toward the stairs together, eyes on the dark below where the voice lived. They did not speak. They did not breathe big. The youngest could hear her name being said inside her skull. It sounded like a shovel scraping concrete. She kept her mouth shut. She gripped the rail. It felt damp in a place that could not be damp. They climbed down. The count came wrong. 82, 65, then 39, then 41, as if the staircase didn't care about how numbers should behave. On step 17, her foot fell through dust that held like water. She yanked her leg back. Her jeans came away white to the knee, as if she had stepped into a river of flour moving beneath a crust. Hook 4. They reached the floor. and moved toward the door hole. The voice rose once, a sound like grief in a mouth that never learned to speak. The youngest felt her name peel off her tongue and float behind her like warm breath in winter. She swallowed and felt it drop back inside. Outside, the air hit them with honest cold. A combine sat dead in the weeds with its mouth full of night. They got in the truck and turned the heater on low. Their phone clock said 3:14. The youngest watched the doorway for a long time, as if something might slide out sideways like a shadow takes a step. When she got home and pulled her boots off, wheat chaff fell out onto the rug. At school the next week, she counted the stairs to the second floor like she always did when she was early. There had always been 21. That morning there were 22. She stood there quiet and went the long way around. She had the sense the elevator had followed her, with a new number burning slow in its dark, patient gut. She moved away from the county after that fall. She never walked up unfamiliar stairs without counting first. If the count came wrong, even by one, she turned around. The rule had shown itself, and she wasn't going to let it learn her name again.
Here is our fourth and last story of the day. The name of the story is The Thing That Wanted Salt. The cold front hit like someone opened a big door over the plains. Folks called it a blue norther. Halloween night came with a north wind that cut through Denham and a sky clear as a dry lake bed. On a small ranch outside a small town, a family kept the porch light off to save the bulb for Saturday. The stock tank by the mesquite was low and slick around the edges. Cows stood with their heads down, backs sharp against the stars. They put the little ones to bed and sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around mugs. The baby monitor hissed, then settled. The house creaked in a way that matched the wind. The old stories from the grandmother's side lived in the wood out there. Lala Souza, the owl witch that comes hunting for voices and salt. Some said she was a woman gone bad. Some said she was never a woman at all. All said she came with a knock you could count. At 10:41 p.m., something tapped the kitchen window from the dark, slow and dry, like a stick. 1, 2, 3. They looked at each other and smiled the way people smile when they pretend at small fear. A minute later it came again. 4, 5, 6. They stood a little less easy. The seventh knock waited as if listening for them to ask for it. When it came, it clicked like a fingernail. They told themselves it was a branch. The mesquite on that side never grew close. The husband went to the mudroom and grabbed the flashlight. The wife stood in the hall where she could see the front door and the back. The house felt still under the wind, the way a big animal holds its breath when it hears something small move nearby. Outside, the flashlight showed the porch empty. No branch touched the glass. Dust had blown into the corner by the boots. The wind pressed along the siding like someone's palm. Far out by the tank, an owl called, not a hoot, but a long cry like a woman trying not to be heard. The baby monitor hissed again and then said a word that sounded like the baby's name spoken by someone who had never learned to say it right. They brought the monitor to the table and set it down. It breathed softly. The house clock showed 11:03. Cows shifted in the pasture with a sound like big coats. The seventh knock came again, but from the door this time, not the window. It landed low, at knee height. They both looked down together as if the place the sound had struck would bruise through the wood. The wife whispered without meaning to. The husband put a finger to his lips like anyone could hear them outside. The seventh knock came softer, sweet as bait. The wind dropped all at once, and the silence pressed in, thick as felt. The baby monitor gave a pop like a blown soap bubble and went quiet. They did not open the door. They stood and let the quiet pass over them. The sound on the porch shifted from door to window to door, around the house in a slow circle, as if a thing with a hand had only one hand and was careful to use it well. The husband felt the urge to whistle, a small neighborly whistle like the one the old uncles used to call the dog. He bit his tongue and did not. He had heard the rule in stories. If you whistle back, it will answer from the chimney and want salt. They went to the bedroom to check the baby. The nightlight burned dim. The crib was warm. The child slept with fists under her chin. A small smear like wet dust sat on the windowsill. The smell of the stock tank came under the sash-old water. Fish slime, iron where the windmill pump had bled. The seventh knock sounded on the outside wall, this time too high for a hand. It sounded like something with a beak tapping the wood to find seams. At midnight, the power blinked once and held. The oven clock reset to 12 o'clock. The porch light clicked on by itself and glowed like a tooth. The cows in the pasture bellowed short and nervous. The owl cried again, closer, not from the trees but from the roof, the way thunder sometimes comes from right on top of you. Something heavy skittered along the shingles. A scrape like a sack of wet feed dragged quick. The chimney breathed a little puff of cool air down into the house that smelled of feathers and a cheap perfume that had been spilled and never cleaned. The baby monitor crackled and said the husband's name, not right. Not wrong, more like it asked how it felt in his mouth when he said it himself. He moved to the kitchen, opened the cabinet, and pulled out the canister of table salt. He stood with it in his hands and felt the urge to open it and pour a line along the windows and doors. He could see how the white would look against the wood, fat and stubborn, a fence a thing like this might hate. He remembered his grandmother using salt for good and for bad, lines you don't cross, circles you don't break, handshakes that mean more than hands. He opened the back door fast and poured a thick line across the threshold, then shut the door before the wind could scold him. The seventh knock hit the door and went hollow, like it struck a church bell with no bell in it. The salt line jumped, a grain at a time, not moving but not still. The owl cried from the chimney, right above the firebox. The sound came down in a ribbon so thin it made their teeth ache. The baby monitor said the baby's name again, sweet as a lullaby. The baby did not cry. She breathed slow and sure. The sound went through the house like a hand checking every latch. The husband took the salt and walked the baseboards. He poured lines under windows, across thresholds, around the crib. The wife followed with a second canister and added to the lines with sugar where the salt ran thin. Not because sugar helps, but because white is white when you need it to be. The seventh knock followed the pour and tested it in little taps. At 1 a.m., the wind died. The silence that landed felt like a big presence settling its weight. Hooves clopped on the porch boards, not cow hooves. Goat or deer, light and quick, stopping, starting, trying a rhythm it did not know. The door handle turned slow and then quick. A dry tongue dragged the gap at the bottom of the door. The salt hissed like rain on a skillet. They stood still and let the salt do what it does. The sugar crusted and turned damp. Something breathed at the keyhole, a slow in and out that turned the metal cold. The chimney gave a soft cough of soot into the firebox as if something underweight had shifted there. The owl cry unspooled into a long laugh that wasn't a laugh. At 2:17, the porch boards bent as if someone had crouched. A whisper slid under the door. It wasn't a language. It was the sound of rust in a pipe when water first begins to move. It grew thinner and thinner until it was only the idea of sound. The husband felt the back of his tongue itch. He put his fist under his chin to keep it shut. He would not whistle back. He would not give it the thing it asked for. At 3:10 a.m., The house loosened. The wind came back small and honest. The seventh knock did not come again. The baby monitor stopped trying to be a mouth. The cows lay down and chewed their cud. The porch steps rose a hair, the way wood does when weight leaves it. They waited until dawn to open the door. The salt line lay thin and gray where the wind had pushed it, but it was still a line. On the porch boards, small scratches ran in arcs, as if a beak blind tested for a gap. The doormat had a wet spot the size and shape of a human hand turned backward at the wrist. Out by the stock tank, the water had gone dark. 10 small fish lay belly up around the rim, their scales blackened like they had been rolled in the coals of a fire and set back gently. They gathered the fish and buried them by the back fence. The husband swept the porch salt into a jar and screwed the lid tight and put it on a high shelf. The wife wiped the baby's window clean and set a small glass of plain water on the sill. When the wind moved through the mesquite and made all the thin leaves sound like rain, they let it. They do not answer knocks if they come in sevens anymore. They do not whistle at night. They keep salt where it can be reached in the dark. They say the old names of things only in daylight. The rule holds, and so does the house. The fields keep their own clocks, and some nights their hands don't match ours. On Halloween in rural Texas, the windmills climb without wind, the road mirrors lag, the silos count wrong, and something on a porch waits for you to forget the old rules. If you remember them, you might walk out whole. If you don't, the land remembers for you, and it keeps what you owe. Tell us where you're listening from in the comments. If these stories stuck to your ribs, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next night we turn off the lights together.